couple of things I want to talk about right here is, first of all, if you haven't identified your remote control, you see a different set of properties than when you have. So for example, so I don't have a remote control, that's right. But the example I want to show you right here is, if you're using the remote control with a rechargeable battery and the charging cradle, once that device is identified, you'll see an option to identify that it's in the charging cradle here, which you can also configure on the remote control. But you want to do that because if you don't, the system will always think that the batteries are low. Because the discharge cycle for an alkaline battery is different than it is for a lithium-ion battery. So make sure you make those changes. Additionally, those watch and listen buttons, you can program them to have all kinds of different behavior. For example, in a default state, when you hit those buttons, it brings up another menu that will allow you to select from a list of options. But if you wanted, you could just say, select the most recently used device. So if you knew that you wanted to just go right back to whatever you were previously watching, you could hit the watch button. Or you could even say no action, and then in your custom programming area, make adjustments and tell it to do whatever you wanted it to. Okay? So any questions there? Let's take a look at our thermostat. So on a real basic level, again, here's an area where we would need to adjust if we were using Fahrenheit versus Celsius, as well as something that Gordon probably mentioned earlier today, using a remote temperature sensor. In a retrofit, you might find that at the thermostat location, you don't have sufficient wiring to work with that thermostat. Our thermostat says that it can use power stealing, but it's kind of hit and miss, and I wouldn't leave it to chance with your customer. So probably what you want to do is, if you're in a scenario where you're at 3 wires or less, you could use a remote sensor, use the existing wiring for that remote sensor, and then take the thermostat and wire it back in the mechanical room where you could provide power for it. That's what I ended up doing at my house. But again, this is more of a retrofit scenario. In new construction, it should never be a question, because you'll be pulling the wire, or at least working with the HVAC contractor and make sure that he pulls the appropriate type of wire. On this page right here, you've got the ability to adjust the schedule. You can have up to 6 different events in a day to adjust your set points. To adjust them, all you have to do is double-click in the box, select your time, select your set points, and then if you want to, you could apply it to the rest of the week. And then it'll push that out. I would say initially with your customers, sit down with them and figure out if they have typical routines, a normal time they wake up, a normal time that they go to sleep, normal time that they go to work. And then you can use these types of features. But remember, you do have an automation system now, and so it's not as necessary. I mean, whenever I get hot or cold at home, I just go to my phone, make my adjustments immediately. And since my wife's at home, when I leave, I don't want to turn the thermostat back down. So I've got that there. Okay? Questions on that setup? There are some advanced properties that you should be aware of. Some of those include if you're working with a dual stage type of thermostat, where perhaps you've got forced air plus radiant heat, something like that. If you do, you've got functions here that will allow you to say, well, if stage 1 has been running for 60 minutes and it still hasn't achieved my set point, then perhaps I move into stage 2, or if it's X amount of degrees past my set point option, maybe I immediately want to kick on to stage 2. There's also heating and cooling cutoffs that can make your system a little bit more energy efficient. Typically what would happen is, let's say my set point was 71 degrees. If the thermostat recognized that it was at 70 degrees, it would turn it on, run it until it got all the way to 71 degrees and then shut off, but maybe I want it to run a little bit longer. So here, it keeps the furnace running, which makes it more energy efficient, but goes past the set point. So that's really up to you. Then there's also temperature calibration. What you might find is the location of the thermostat doesn't give you an accurate reading for the house. So you want to go in with your own thermostat, find out what the temperature really is, and then you can calibrate it right here. Or you can do like I do, which is my wife is always freezing, so I just say, crank that up a little bit, and when she says, I'm cold, I say, well, thermostat says it's 78 degrees. Yeah, put a blanket on. But in reality, it probably is like 72. Questions on that? Okay. Let me have you add something really quickly to that kitchen area. Actually, I'll have you add it, not to the kitchen, let's have you add it to the living room.
See, your natural inclination is to do it in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's because I want those, wood-fired pizzas. So the activity didn't have you add a fireplace to the living room, but I'm going to have you add one anyway. So in the living room, come over to My Drivers, and let's have you add in fireplace. Add in the gas fireplace, not the fireplace switch. Now with a relay, I want to examine its properties. You've got a toggle type or a pulse type of functionality. Toggle type means when you close the relay, it stays closed. When you open the relay, it stays open. Pulse type is where it closes for a brief second, or you could have it be longer than just a second. So whatever you want to set it up to right here. Then it goes back to its original state. Now the type you use is going to be based on the type of trigger that you're trying to utilize. So for example, your garage door at home is probably a pulse type, but your fireplace is probably a toggle type. That's just generalizations though, I don't really know. And that would be for you to make the determination on, but the software will support either type. On the back of our controllers, we also can wire for a normally opened or a normally closed type of relay. But if you happen to wire it incorrectly, you can always invert the relay so that its behavior will be the opposite. And finally, this wattage area only applies to high voltage panelized lighting. So low voltage, you don't have to fill in this information. High voltage, it's there to help you determine how much wattage you can get on a single circuit. Okay? So let's tinker around with these. This is going to be activities 6, 7, and 8.
Please tell me it's bigger. Oh, hey, somebody was thinking right. I wish they'd make it a little bigger, and then you don't have to use the adapter.
Interesting.
Well, I think the adapter's on there.
You guys, everything going the way it's supposed to?
Good, very much so.
Yes.
You guys back here doing everything?
So is the fireplace supposed to light up on those lights?
Yeah, so had you merged it with one?
No.
Go to the back of your controller, so click on connections and then click on the 800. And then scroll to your relays, right under the contacts, and choose one through 4. See the relays?
Okay.
And then drag it down to the fireplace. So you have to do that for that to be connected with the actual output from the controller.
Okay.
Now I'll try and turn on your fireplace.
Very
Woohoo!
nice.
You feel the flame come
I
on?
do. It's nice and warm.
James, everything okay?